The bill will be now read a second time. I now call the member for Dawson.
Thank you very much, Acting Deputy Speaker. And I rise, well, I would say with gladness, but unfortunately I can't because of what's contained in the Appropriation Bill number 3, 2012-13 and the Appropriation Bill number 4, 2012-13. It's a case of saddling up again for another spending expedition by the Gillard Labor government. Together, these bills load an additional $1.27 billion in expenses into the economy saddlebags. That's $600.8 million in Appropriation Bill number 3 for, amongst other things, offshore asylum seeker management and visa compliance with a bill of $37 million, visa and migration services and refugee settlement with a bill of $23 million, increased border protection capability with a bill of $24 million, and $19 million to help the Australian Taxation Office funnel potentially lost superannuation member accounts into government revenue. Appropriation Bill number 4 will add a further $666 million worth of weight to the economic saddlebags. That's right, $666 million, the mark of the beast. And I'm starting to wonder, with all this lead in the saddlebags, when the pony's going to crumble under the weight. Already the economy is straining under the weight of the biggest government debt ever on record. Already the Gillard and previously the Rudd Labor governments delivered the 4 biggest budget deficits on record, back to back, so they're on a roll. And who's at the reins? Well, economically speaking, it's the Treasurer. He's the culprit. The same Treasurer that abysmally failed to balance the books under the former Prime Minister, the member for Griffith, that is continuing to be an abysmal failure for the current Prime Minister. And the reason behind that consistent failure and the consistent failure of the Labor Party is the fact that they only know one thing. They know how to tax and spend. Tax and spend. Wasteful Wayne, or the Treasurer I should say, is on a one-pony trick. And if I could borrow a line from that great musician Paul Simon, one trick is all that horse can do. Paul Simon might have had a premonition when he released the song One Trick Pony back in 1980, because that was before the member for Longman was born, and as we all know, we haven't seen a Labor government deliver a surplus in his lifetime. But just before Labor delivered their last surplus, Paul Simon wrote these words: "He's a one-trick pony, one trick is all that horse can do, he does one trick only, it's the principal source of his revenue." And that is exactly what we have in this Labor Treasurer, a pony whose only source of revenue is to tax. In 5 years, the Rudd and Gillard governments have done nothing to increase revenue other than tax. They have done nothing to grow the economy. They have done nothing to help manufacturing be more productive, nothing to encourage tourism in this country, and I acknowledge the Shadow Tourism Minister here in the room, but done nothing to boost agriculture. Instead, to find the extra revenue they need to feed their spending habits, their out-of-control spending habits, they simply jack up the taxes. Not content with taxing families alone, they borrow more money, and they're actually adding to the debt that will be serviced and repaid by taxing the next generation. Today's debt, Labor's debt, is tomorrow's taxes, plain and simple. But the Gillard Labor government is trying to convince us they're this low-taxing government, and there's 2 problems with making that claim. Firstly, the spending this year will be 23.8% of GDP. That's $90 billion more than the last budget of the Howard government. All funded by taxes, as I said, taxes on families today and taxes on the next generation. The debt is tomorrow's taxes. That's how it's paid off. It's one trick and one trick only. And people can see through that trick, and they're getting pretty sick of it. They're getting pretty sick of it because the things that they need aren't being funded. The infrastructure we need for a strong and prosperous Australia will never be funded by this government because they're too busy trying to cling to power, too busy giving out cash to people in blatant vote-buying exercises and trying to hide the fact that it's the same money that they've actually taken off them. Only some of it got wasted in the process. The legacy that this Labor government has built so far is an annual interest bill of $7 billion a year. $7 billion a year in interest. $7 billion they have to tax Australians every year just to pay back the interest on the debt that they created in 5 years. Well, in simple terms, it's $800,000 an hour. $800,000 an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's the interest bill. The biggest boom the country has ever seen, and Labor's created a debt so big it costs us $800,000 an hour in interest, while the wealth-producing sectors and regions in the economy are crying out for infrastructure. We're wasting $800,000 an hour, every hour, in interest. If Wasteful Wayne had never taken the reins of this one-trick pony, we would have had $800,000 every hour available to spend on something important, like the Bruce Highway in Queensland. In 3 days, the money that could have fixed, say, Sandy Gully, a section on the Bruce Highway that floods every time there's a heavy shower, cutting off the port of Abbott Point from workers based in Mackay or nearby Bowen. It would have taken 3 days of Labor's interest. In just over 18 days, the interest repayments on Labor's debt could have fully funded floodproofing the Gaganga Plains, which actually separates the Whitsunday Coast Airport from the Whitsunday Coast itself, one of our prime tourism destinations. Or it could have been used to replace the Horton River Bridge in the Burdekin and floodproofed the approaches. In just over 3 weeks, those interest repayments on Labor's debt could have fully funded the Mackay Ring Road, a project that would make the region that's producing so much wealth even more productive. The Ring Road would connect an intensive industrial centre servicing the mines of the Bowen Basin while keeping heavy, dangerous vehicle off the local roads. These are big projects. These are important projects for the continued development of the wealth in this country. But faced with the challenge of a shrinking income, this government plays to its strengths. It resorts to the only thing it knows: increase taxes and borrow more money, which taxes our children before they're even born. At the same time as racking up debt and raising taxes, the Gillard Labor government still manages to cut funding for essential services. In the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook, which the Treasurer delivered in October last year, we saw federal government cuts to state health funding. They cut the funding they were delivering to the states, not just from this year, but from the last year as well. Current and retrospective cuts to the National Health Reform Fund and the National Healthcare Special Purpose Payment leaves the states copping the blame for federal Labor's savage cuts to health. In the 2012-13 budget released in May, the National Healthcare Special Purpose Payment for Queensland for that year alone was $2.545 billion. But when that year's final budget outcome was actually released in September, that figure was reduced to $2.505 billion, a cut of $40 million. Again, in the 2012-13 budget released in May, the National Health Reform funding for Queensland was supposed to be $2.724 billion. But when the Treasurer released MyEFO in October, that figure was reduced to $2.661 billion, a cut of $63 million. So combined, Queensland's forced to pass on federal Labor's health cuts of $103 million to regions who only have half a year in which to make up those savings. In my electorate, the Gillard Labor government's health cuts translate to a $3.2 million cut to the Mackay Hospital and Health Service, a cut to their budget midway through the year. Now, I've spoken with the chairman, the independent chairman of the board of the hospital in Mackay, and he has confirmed that the board is deliberating this month on how to find those savings. It is a real cut, and he has to find real savings, his board, either by cutting staff, which is a prospect they don't want to do but may be forced to do, or cutting services at probably all of the hospitals: the Mackay Base Hospital, the Serena Hospital, the Proserpine Hospital, the Bowen Hospital, the Moranbah Hospital as well. The Townsville Hospital and Health Board in the northern part of my electorate also faces federal Labor health cuts of $7.8 million this year, and they've already said that the cuts are going to be born out of numerous things. One of the things, they're going to cut back on the number of free bandages that they actually hand out to patients. I mean, the federal government's cut means less bandages for patients. It's just disgraceful. How much can be saved by cutting back on those bandages, I don't know. I don't think it'll amount to much, actually. At some point, they're going to have to go further and find more savings. And I've got to tell you that it's truly disappointing to watch the Queensland Nurses Union just sitting on the sidelines on this issue, because everyone apart from them acknowledges that it's real cuts, and it just shows they're beholden to the Labor Party. And in the town of Home Hill in the Burdekin, which the Townsville Health Board actually services, they've got this fantastic little local hospital, the Home Hill Hospital. It's a marginal hospital in terms of their costs, and you know, it is quite possible. It is quite possible that this hospital will have to be looked at and could suffer quite drastically, actually, in terms of finding savings for the $7.8 billion Gillard Labor government cut to the Townsville Health and Hospital Service. So, you know, we're going to have to fight for the survival of that hospital because of this. These are the real things that are happening on the ground in my electorate because of these savage cuts imposed to health services right throughout Queensland. The Gillard Labor government is happy to roll out cuts to services across wealth-producing regions in North Queensland, and then they try and blame it on the state governments. Well, it won't work. There has been no attempt to increase revenue from the region by fostering growth and investing in infrastructure and industry. In fact, we had this bizarre situation in the Parliament last week where the Assistant Treasurer said spending money on infrastructure in North Queensland was investing in white elephants. White elephants, that's what he said. And my North Queensland colleague, the member for Herbert, rightly challenged the Assistant Treasurer to nominate exactly which infrastructure projects in North Queensland he considered would be white elephants. And I'd suggest if that Assistant Treasurer should ever head north to explain himself to North Queenslanders, he'd have to leave the boat in the marina and take a drive on the Bruce Highway. The Bruce is the lifeblood of the north and responsible for an enormous amount of wealth generation. And when it fails, it's an obstacle to wealth generation. Investing in infrastructure like the Bruce Highway, our national highway, is not investing in a white elephant. It's investing in the future. It is investing in revenue streams that don't involve increasing taxes and taxing the next generation, taxing our children. In 2.5 years, this Labor government have done nothing positive that I can see, nothing positive. The Gillard Labor government is focused on taxing the wealth creators. Instead of playing to Australia's strengths and supporting mining and supporting manufacturing, they've played to their strengths, taxing and waste. They've taxed the mining industry, creating uncertainty, although delivering no money, but it has created sovereign risk, deterring investment and costing jobs. There's 3,400 of them, the Queensland Resource Council said have been lost from across my state. They've taxed every business in the country with a carbon tax, every household in the country with a carbon tax on their electricity bills. You cannot tax a country into prosperity. If tax and waste is the only trick the Labor government can perform, it will never lead us to prosperity. It will lead to a slump. It will lead to lower GDP, decreased revenues, yet more tax and more cuts to services. What this country needs is a plan for a stronger, more prosperous economy through supporting and developing our strengths. Now, I've spent the last 2 years travelling around my electorate of Dawson, talking with families and engaging with industries and locals, and it's clear that North Queenslanders feel that the government has lost its way and continues to lose its way. Through conversations and surveys and other forms of engagement, my constituents are telling me that the government lacks vision. They say that this government lacks a plan for the future. North Queenslanders have always also told me about their concerns, their hopes and their dreams. Through 2 years of information gathering, through community surveys, forums, my Fix the Bruce campaign where I had a comprehensive survey of the electorate on the Bruce Highway, through business forums, responses from newsletters, and I've got a whole of the electorate survey going out at the moment that's certainly got a great response. We've had thousands of surveys flood back in. All of that information I'm going to use to create a roadmap for the region. And that will be the plan I'll be pushing for the next government to commit to, for the benefit of my electorate and the nation as a whole, as we're a wealth-generating region. These are the things that are going to be in that plan will be what the community wants, and a lot of them I've been talking about for the past 2 years in this place. But the Labor government has failed to listen to me and to the people and has failed to address those important issues. North Queensland, North Australia and Australia as a whole won't realise its full potential when it's saddled with a government that knows only one thing. It's time to put the one-trick pony out to pasture, and it's time to get on with the job.
Thank you.